Well, happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Ask Mike. First and foremost, if you hear any buzzing, I think some guy's installing a pool upstairs.
The guy out here jackhammering the asphalt out beside our building or whatever. It's been going on all morning.
Yeah.
You know, you're trying to work, but there it goes.
There it is. So if you hear it, we apologize in advance for all of the noise. It's Monday. What can you do? But of course, we always like to start with our COVID-19 update, but it's going to be a little different, Mike, because a lot's happened in the past 24 hours.
I don't think anything's really changed with COVID, but a lot's changed with what's going on with college football and the reaction to that. Now, let's back up to yesterday afternoon when reports started sort of surfacing from two sources. One was SportsIllustrated.com, the other was ESPN, and they were both saying basically the same thing. College football season's about to be canceled. Looks like they said the Power 5 athletic directors are going to vote to get rid of it. Then that sort of panicked everybody for a while. By later in the evening, these hashtag "we want to play" things started. And it really first started in the afternoon, and of all schools, Arkansas State was the first one to jump up and do it. So let's take a look at what they said. We can say with overwhelming conviction that not only do we want to play the 2020 season, we are also confident the appropriate steps are being taken to ensure we do so in a safe manner with everyone's health and well-being the top priority. Now, last night there was this from Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence. Let's work together to create a situation where we can play the game that all of us love, not divide and argue. There is a way forward. And this from Florida running back Lorenzo Lingard. I want to play, even if we got to be locked in. Nothing at home for me. Does that not say it all for a lot of these kids? Now, early this morning, Hunter Yurachek became the first AD to publicly endorse playing the season. He tweeted, "On behalf of the Razorback football team," and that includes my son, "and each of the Arkansas Razorback student athletes that I represent, serve, support, care for, fight for, and love, hashtag we want to play." That's when this started, hashtag we want to play. And finally, this from Sam Pittman: "The way our student athletes have handled these uncertain times is incredible, and our staff is so proud of them as the head coach of the Razorback football team, hashtag we want to play." Now, there's two conflicting things out there. There's a hashtag whatever, we are united or whatever. That's one thing, and hashtag we want to play. But the we want to play stuff really went viral. There were thousands of these things. It quickly became kind of the #1 social media thing last night. And then the developments today are this. It looks like, and shock of all shocks, that ESPN and SportsIllustrated.com jumped the gun a little bit. They may have been speaking for the Big Ten and maybe the Pac-10, but apparently not for the SEC, not for the ACC, and I'm not sure about the Big 12 so far. But we started getting information this morning from the SEC and the ACC. Hey, we haven't canceled anything. And then Hunter Yurachek made an appearance on Paul Feinbaum's show about, 30 minutes ago. And he said a lot of things, but he said basically, we're not going to panic because another conference decides to do something. We have a plan. We approved that plan. We think it's a good plan, and we're going to go forward. He also said it may be that the college football season has to survive without some of the conferences, but it will survive. So he went on to say, look, I'm not saying absolutely there's no circumstances under which we would have to cancel the season, but he said based on what we're doing right now, we think we're doing the right thing. And I think if you look at these hashtag movement things, you've got a lot of athletes that are basically saying, we trust the conferences that we're a part of, the schools we're a part of. We know what their plan is, and we're not making demands. We just want to play.
I know the SEC has done this, and I don't know about the other Power 5 conferences, but the SEC has said if you don't want to play as a student athlete, you don't have to, and you're not going to lose your scholarship. So they've already said there are some players who might not feel comfortable. And if they don't want to play, then they don't have to play. But I also thought that this was the whole reason behind this is why we're going to do a conference-only schedule, was so that you have these pockets. If a conference were to have to shut down, the rest of the football season could survive. And again, that's kind of what's happening, is they're shutting down now instead of in the middle of a season. But the ACC, the SEC, if they choose to, could still survive and give their student athletes the option to play or not play.
And we got at least one Ohio State player that said, hey, we ought to join the SEC for this season, and people are already saying, yeah, put them on Arkansas' schedule.
And it's not even just Ohio State. You've seen Jim Harbaugh come out and write a letter. You've seen Ohio State's head coach Ryan Day come out and make statements, and then you have a press conference with Scott Frost at Nebraska, and Nebraska, one of the schools who voted to have the football season continue.
So you've almost got a revolt within the Big Ten.
A little bit of, exactly. And again, it was the Big Ten president who made this vote. It was I think a 10-2 vote, or 8-2 vote. But Nebraska's Scott Frost said, if the Big Ten does not play, that's unfortunate, but we're going to find a way to play, making it sound like he'd like to contact other schools like the SEC and the Big 12 to try to play some games.
You know, it's just very strange because these schools apparently are going to go ahead and open up for students. And it's just hard to understand why they can have classes, but they can't have student athletes playing football. And I think that's where they're getting a little bit of pushback. Now, we don't know what's going to happen. There's still reports that the Big Ten is going to vote tomorrow night, and the vote is something like, I don't know, 8-2 or something, and they're going to go ahead and vote to cancel it, and then the Pac-10 is expected to follow. But based on what's happened so far in the last 24 hours, I wouldn't necessarily say that's true, because the media reports have been wrong so far. Now, we'll see if it happens. But I do think we can at least say the panic should have subsided a little bit from areas of the country which are a little more normal and aren't just hell-bent on changing everything and getting rid of college football. Parts of the country where people do see there's a way to play and do it safely. And so right now it looks like the SEC and the ACC are definitely moving forward. And I would expect the Big 12 to do the same thing.
We talked about this yesterday, and I apologize as we continue to stick on this, but I think this is really important. When you talk about having students in classes but no college football, we talked about Major League Baseball yesterday, and I understand you're not tackling people in Major League Baseball. You're a lot more distance in Major League Baseball. But the COVID outbreaks that they have had have not happened during a game.
That's right.
It hasn't, the team outbreaks haven't happened while they were playing the sport of baseball. So it is interesting. Exactly. And again, it's an unknown. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so again, a lot of other people are making these decisions. We're just here to talk about it, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And Hunter Yurchek and several of these other ADs have gone on today and said we don't have anybody testing positive right now. They're pushing the idea that, we had some problems initially back in the summer, but once we got our athletes to understand that they need to really isolate themselves and just come to the complex and then go home, we've done a much better job.
Sure. And I know there are some people that are saying, well, they're college students, they're going to go out and party and be at bars, and I mean, not that I'm doing that, but you don't see anybody really on Dixon Street right now. It's pretty empty down here, and we're close to Dixon Street. And I think, again, Sam Pittman has said he trusts his guys, and they're making smart decisions when it comes to staying socially distant. All right, we're going to get into these questions now. I know there are a lot of them, and I've kind of flipped my papers in a way to I'm confusing them, but I believe here we are. My first question of our Ask Mike segment comes from Myra Rocker, who wants to know, do you think the UConn canceling their season could be a sign of things to come for others? The thought did cross my mind that the dominoes would soon fall as I read that, and I think a week from this question, here we are now.
Yeah, and they were the first ones, but let me just say, I don't think what UConn did had any effect on anybody else except UConn.
Yeah.
I don't think what's happening with the Big Ten was as a result of that. So I don't believe in the domino theory here. I think we've seen evidence that even if these other two Power 5 conferences do it, it's not necessarily going to domino into the other three. But UConn, no, that didn't have anything to do with what's going on right now.
Hashtag Hammerdown asks, if the hashtag We Are United group gains traction, do you see this spreading to all of the Power 5 schools? Do you suspect the schools will play with the players that want to be there, or will they give in to demands?
Well, let's go back and explain that again, because that We Are United, hashtag We Are United, apparently there was a group of guys, players in the Pac-10, and
12.
they had Pac-12, and they had lawyers representing them. And yes, they were wanting to have a say in the safety protocols, but they also ended up with other demands, and one of those other demands was, we want 50% of the revenue from college athletics. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to let you do that. You're not going to be an amateur athlete if you do that. And I know that I've read some online articles. The Washington Post wrote a big thing saying, oh, how terrible this is. They're just taking advantage of these athletes. Let me talk about the cost of attendance scholarship, which is what they get. You and I have talked about this a lot. Those athletes now, and not just at Arkansas, but across the country, they're living better than most of us. They've got enough money for the food situation is whatever you want. They've got good dining facilities on campus where they've got professional cooks that will cook you anything you want, or for a certain diet or whatever, or you can go out and buy meals on your own. But it's a long way from what used to be the case. And then they've got more money for better places to stay. If you don't want to stay in one of the best dorm rooms on campus, you can go off campus.
You get a stipend.
You get a stipend to pay for that, and it's for a good one. And then most of them are getting around $800 a month spending money, and that's for 20 hours a week work. So they're not being totally taken advantage of. They're getting their tuition. At a lot of schools now, tuition's up $20,000, $30,000 a year. So you got to throw that into what you're getting. These athletes were making these demands, and I'm looking on Twitter today, and it looks like some of them that were involved in this have already been booted off their football teams. I think it scared a lot of these administrators in these Pac-12 schools, and I think they're pushing back. And some say that that's part of what's going on here is, okay, you want to threaten us? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll cancel the season. That's what we'll do. So I don't know if that's the only thing behind this, but that is a very different movement that We Are United than the hashtag We Want to Play. It's two completely different movements.
All right, Lanny wants to know, of the SEC schools with the new coaches, which do you see will have the most adjustments this season? Which will have the best chance for a successful season in 2020?
Man, you talk about taking a guess, because that's a pretty much of a stretch to try and guess on something like. Look, I'm going to take a wild stab at this and answering this question. I'm going to say that Mike Leach has such a strange offensive system, and he does. It's unlike what most schools do. His running backs are used more as receivers. It's not unusual for them to throw 3 passes in a series of downs and just barely make a first down. They throw all these 4- and 5-yard passes. They do all these things, and then their quarterback has to react to all this stuff. It's sort of like what Chad Morris does, only much more complicated. Now he's got a transfer quarterback that he brought in from for the Pac-12, and the guy's good. But their offensive line has problems. They've lost a lot of guys, and I just think they're going to have a hard time implementing the offensive part of that system. And then Mike Leach does not have a history of worrying much about defense. And that's been a big part of what Mississippi State does. So I'm going to say they will have the biggest adjustment. I'm just going to guess here. I'm going to say that Kendall Briles' system, the way it's been described to us, is very simple. The only complicated part of it is he wants everybody to go fast. And we know that was a problem the last 2 years under Morris. But I'm going to say with better coaching, they're going to get this done. And so I will say that Arkansas has the easiest adjustment.
Okay.
It's a total guess.
All right. Delta Boy wants to know any word on this year's uniforms.
I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you have. But
No, I think Mike Woods tweeted some photos in a uniform, and they've taken their pictures, that they usually do.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
But look, we haven't asked Pittman that. We've had several Zooms with him over the summer. And
Uniforms isn't at the top of the list.
that's not anywhere.
You only get 2 questions.
I think you would feel pretty silly if you asked that question right now. There are just too many other pressing things. I think basically what's going to happen when we get closer to the season, someday they're just going to pop up and say, here are our uniforms. But it'll probably be when the game's about to be played.
Hey, when Georgia and Florida were announced as Arkansas's opponents this year, it was Jared Cornelius who retweeted the picture of himself mocking the Gator Chomp in the anthracite uniforms and chrome helmets they wore the last time they beat Florida, and was like, we need to bring these back. And I am 100% in favor of those anthracites, and they can take those on the road and play them and use them in the swamp and beat Florida again. So I vote, that's my vote on uniforms. Okay. That's all I got to say about it. All right. Blood Red Hog wants to know, with the new SEC football practice schedule and delay to the start of the season, is this not a win for Sam Pittman? It appears he will have more practice time with the team than he would have had with the traditional spring practice fall camp.
Well, with the original plan, which they were supposed to start the first week in August, it would have given you almost 2 months of, it would have given you a month of August camp, which is about twice as long as you have with that, and 2 months overall. So that would have been great. But that's not what happened. A week after that schedule was announced, they came back, pushed the season back, but they also pushed the start of practices back. And then they put these extra limitations in there, like there's a time, only 20 hours a week, even in August camp, and that was never in there before. August camp was a period when there's no students on campus. We've got you all ourselves. We can come up here and work you 8 hours a day for 5 straight days, 40 hours in a week. Well, that's out. It's only going to be 20. They've got spacing in between practices. You have 3 practices. You have to have a day off, 2 more, another day off, and all that.
Have to have 2 days off in a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once that's all done, what you end up with is about what you would have had if you had August camp start the second week in August and you had to play the second week in September. So it's a wash. They're not getting extra time, but nothing's going Arkansas's way right now, except apparently what happened today, which they're announcing they're still going to play.
Yep. So as of right now, the SEC is still playing football, so we have that. LZH wants to know, most of the better teams we may play this year lost quite a bit through
the draft.
The draft.
You
Am I
lost
missing a page?
I can read it.
Maybe.
Through our
There we
graduation.
go. I can just look up and read it.
Yeah, any
Sorry.
chance. Go ahead.
Any chance that might be a good thing, considering we seem to have a better roster than last year and much better coaching this year? I like the optimism.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this team is going to be better this year. I do think that Alabama lost some players, but they always lose players, and they managed to make it up. Auburn, you could look at them and say, hey, they took a hit. LSU definitely took a hit. But the problem with those 3 schools is they're so good and they recruit so well, you're going to assume they're going to replace those guys. So I don't think the fact that those 3 schools lost players, and maybe an extraordinary number of players, I don't think that's going to mean Arkansas wins that game. That's not the games I'm looking at. I'm looking at Mississippi State that I mentioned before. That's at Starkville, but if you only have maybe 10 or 15,000, 20,000 fans and fewer cowbells, I think the atmosphere is better, so I think that game's winnable. I think Missouri, same thing. That's a team that's beatable, and you go up to Missouri, and if they have 10 or 15, 20,000 people in there, it makes it easier to win there. Auburn is a team that's interesting. You take the crowd out of the mix because they're going to Auburn. I think that makes that a different place.
Yeah.
And they have lost some people too, so maybe that's an opportunity to win that game. And then I don't know why I'm doing this, but this has been going on for a while in my mind. A&M is supposed to be pretty good. They've got their quarterback coming back. He's a veteran. But I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, you know what? They're Aggies. They might we got a new coaching staff here, and I don't think they're going to put up with this continuing to lose to the Aggies. So wouldn't it be good if they just went down to College Station and in front of about 30,000 Aggies with about 60,000 empty seats, just beat them? That'd be good.
I'd like Jimbo Fisher to lose all his games.
Yeah, be good.
You would. All right, here we go. River Valley Honk 55 wants to know, have you heard if the NCAA or SEC officials will have the authority to penalize a team for violating some new COVID-19 rules or guidelines? If you haven't heard anything to this regard, do you think that is coming next?
This falls under the category, again, of questions that have not been asked. No one thought to ask that, so it hasn't been addressed. And I don't know what's going to happen, but it sounds like a good way of doing it. Sounds like a plan. I would think these guidelines are pretty important. Everybody's trying to stay safe. So the way you enforce something like that in football is there's a penalty for it.
Yep.
And I think you can step in and penalize 2 or 3 these teams early in the season. Everybody gets the message, yeah, we got to have the mask on, we got to do the right thing.
And I think that there is, they've assigned each school an official?
Yeah, a guy
and it's kind of almost like your compliance. Your compliance is there to make sure you follow the rules. And so this is kind of an extension of the compliance department so that everybody is following the same guidelines. All right. Sal Manila wants to know, look into your crystal ball and give me your best guess as to when we will become competitive again in the SEC.
You know, competitive, what does that really mean? I mean, to some people, competitive would be, okay, we're not going to do anything really stupid. We're not going to have dopey special team errors where some guy looks like he's going to tackle somebody and the guy stops and he lets him go and run a touchdown. We're not going to try some stupid fake punt that we lateral the ball to somebody else and the other team has it. So if you don't do that stuff, and if you have consistent defense, not playing good defense one week and ridiculously bad defense the next week, and you don't have like 4 or 5 starting quarterbacks, that none of which can do anything once they become the starter. They look good when they come off the bench, but they can't do anything as a starter. If you don't have those things and you're just playing harder and better, that to me is competitive, and it's better than what you had. So I think the first year they're going to be competitive, and I do think they'll win some SEC games, 1 or 2 at least. Competitive in terms of, hey, we're going to make some noise in the SEC. We're going to shake up the West. We might challenge Alabama or something like that. That's at least 2 years away, maybe 3, I think.
All right. Delta Boy, and this will be our last one because we ranted a little bit, did a lot of talking. Delta Boy is back with a question, and I want to know this too. Are you serious about Arkansas courting the Big 12?
Okay, that's kind of a complete misunderstanding of what I said last week. I never said anything about Arkansas was courting the Big 12. I said in response to that schedule that was out, and I didn't say it on this show. I think I said it.
We said it on our
on another
broadcast.
I think we were up on the news or something. I don't know. Maybe it was online, but I basically said if I were the AD, this would be the last straw. You got to understand something. This is my opinion. I don't like the SEC. That doesn't mean that I think that they're going to listen to me and get out of the SEC. Polls show that only about 30% of the fans right now are mad enough to talk about starting to leave. About 60% still say, yeah, it stinks, but we still want to be in the league. So forget what I say. I mean, it's just my opinion. I'm on this show and I give my opinion. I don't like the SEC. I liked it back when Roy Kramer was the commissioner. I think he did a good job of kind of being fair to everybody, but you know, this guy, Mike Slive, and he's passed away since, but he came along and everything changed, and then Greg Sankey's come along. To me, it's all too political. But on the other hand, let's give the SEC credit for stepping up today. If you're in another conference as dopey as the Big Ten or the Pac-12, how would you like to be in one of those conferences where way before this thing starts, they just go, up, let's just close it down. I like to be in a conference where people are sensible. It's not that they don't care about safety, but they put safety protocols in place, and they're saying, hey, let's sit back and wait and see what's going on a month and a half from now, not now. So I got to give the SEC a little bit of credit. It's pretty good to be in the SEC today because you know you're probably going to have a chance of playing college football.
All right. Well, golly, who knows what's going to happen between now and next Monday when we have another Ask Mike segment. Hopefully not too much, because I'm going to tell you what, it's stressing me out.
It's stressing you out.
It's a lot. I like Twitter, and it's different and all the time, and it's a lot. You can't step away from your phone for 15 minutes kind of stress. For Mike Irwin, I'm Melissa Orange. That's another Ask Mike. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week, hopefully, if I'm not too stressed out.